I'm Jason Reynolds, and I'm the superintendent for the Peoria Unified School District. There's been a lot of talk over the last few years about school finance, and so a school district like ours have put together videos to help our communities better understand how schools are funded and where the money goes. They've used all kinds of creative approaches for these videos, and as a team, we sat down and talked about how we might be able to better capture your attention. We talked about doing animation.
Funds in the maintenance and operation bucket pay for the day-to-day operation of our schools.
But you're adults, not kids, and the video should appeal to your sensibilities. What about a musical?
5, 6, 7, 8.
But we're educators, not entertainers. So let's dispense with the entertainment and commence with your school finance education. Let's begin. Arizona schools receive their funding from local property owners, the state of Arizona, and the federal government. Local and state sources provide about 90% of the funding, and the remainder comes from the federal government. But unlike your own budget, the use of those funds is restricted by law on how the funds can be spent. Before the district can use the funding, it is split into two separate buckets. Approximately 96% of the funds from local taxpayers and the state are placed into the maintenance and operations bucket, with the remaining 4% going into the capital bucket. The 4% of the budget in the capital bucket pays for durable items that are owned or used by the school for many years, like furniture, buses, textbooks, and technology. Funds in the maintenance and operation bucket pay for the day-to-day operation of our schools, including salaries, transportation, utilities, and general supplies like paper. All districts are required to have a balanced budget and cannot spend more than is provided in the two buckets. If the money in either of the two buckets is not enough to meet the needs of our students, the district can ask the local community to pass an override or bond to increase the available funds. Overrides and bonds are different, and the funds they generate add to the different buckets. With voter approval, the Peoria Unified School District may issue bonds that are paid back over time, similar to a mortgage or a line of credit. Bond proceeds fund capital projects that have a useful life longer than 5 years, such as new school buildings or maintenance and repair of current buildings, acquiring new buses, and technology for our schools. Overrides provide additional funds for the maintenance and operations bucket, and thanks to our community, a 13% override passed in November of 2015, which allowed us to bring back free all-day kindergarten and to provide salary increases for our staff, as well as support invaluable resources such as assistant principals, nurses, arts education, reading programs, gifted education, athletics, and extracurricular activities. Overrides are approved for a 7-year term, and if not renewed by voters, the funding begins to be reduced in years 6 and 7. And by year 8, the funding is fully eliminated. Without the current override, the district's maintenance and operation budget would shrink by more than $27 million. To maintain a consistent level of funding, many districts will ask voters to renew an override in year 4 or 5 of the current term. Does school finance make more sense to you now? I hope it does. But if you have more questions about our budget, please visit our website at peoriaunified.org/bonds and overrides, or call us at 623-486-6100.
You guys all set? Good. Good. Stand. Okay. Dr. Reynolds? Dr. Reynolds?
Yes, sir.
Ready? Good?
You bet.
All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's board meeting. It's great to see so many individuals attend this evening's meeting, so I really appreciate your presence. So let's call this meeting, convene this meeting at, looks like 6:03 p.m. Opening exercises 2.1. Ms. Stone, do you want to lead us? Would you mind leading us in the pledge? Sure. Yeah, I think that was something we were considering doing, but I think that makes sense. Ms. Contra, can you? I'll second that.
I was just going to ask.
I'll give you a moment to make that quick change.
Thank you, President Sandoval. I'll move that.
You're welcome. Ms. San Martinez, any changes to the agenda that you'd like to make?
Nope, that was my request as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I don't have any either, so we'll move on to Section 4, recognitions, 4.1. Recognitions, there she is, Ms. Ari.
Good evening, President Sandoval, members of the board, Dr. Reynolds, and guests that have joined us this evening. I would like to recognize one of our longtime community partners, the American Heart Association. And many of you may be familiar with a program we've had in our school district and in school districts all across Arizona. The American Heart Association puts on Jump Rope for the Heart program. There's so much more to them beyond that. And over the past few years, in fact, our partnership has really expanded and grown. We have been partnering with them through Kids Heart Challenge, an innovative youth program that has an important social and emotional component, focusing on whole child wellness. This program provides curriculum and resources that align with district standards and goals and gives back directly benefiting our schools. Tonight we had planned to recognize them and have a guest from the American Heart Association join us. She wasn't able to be with us but sent in a video on behalf of the American Heart Association. Here's Morgan Porter, the Senior Director of the Youth Market for the American Heart Association, sharing more.
Hello, President Sandoval, members of the board and guests. Thank you so much for allowing me a few minutes to present during your meeting. My name is Morgan Porter, and I'm the Senior Director in Arizona for the American Heart Association. I work directly with the Peoria Unified School District through our school-based wellness partnership program. I am here today to congratulate the Peoria Unified School District on their accomplishment of making a difference in their community and raising life-saving dollars for the American Heart Association. The funds are raised through students learning about how to keep their hearts healthy while asking family members to support their heart health initiatives of moving more, saying no to vaping, being kind and choosing water over sugary beverages by pledging dollar donations to the Kids Heart Challenge. This year, Sunset Heights, Zuni Hills, Frontier, Oasis, Apache, Coyote Hills, and Desert Harbor raised over $32,000 in life-saving funds. Our mission at the AHA is to be a relentless force for a world of longer, healthier lives. Our mission would not be possible without the support from such a phenomenal district such as Peoria Unified. Thank you, Dr. Reynolds, for your commitment to the health and well-being of your students and support of our partnership. I am so looking forward to continue building a healthier and happier community with your staff, students, and their families, and I'm hoping to reach even more Peoria schools with this important heart health message. Whether they are elementary, middle, no matter if students are learning for their campuses or at home, the American Heart Association is here for them. We are in this together. Thank you. Hello, President Sandoval, members of the board.
So President Sandoval, members of the board, on behalf of the Peoria Unified School District, we are just so grateful for our partnership with the American Heart Association. Appreciate them for all they're doing to support our kids and our community.
Agreed. Yeah, invaluable partner. Any comments, questions? Ms. Down?
I was glad to hear that,
Ms. Pingerelli?
No, I just wanted to say thank you also. It was 32,000? That was right?
Yeah. President Sandoval, Mrs. Pingrelli, yes.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Ms. Sierra Martinez.
Just thank you to Peoria Unified, especially during these challenging times. We still find time to support each other during COVID, so thank you so much.
Thank you for that, and yeah, just invaluable, and the ability to maintain a sense of human kindness and collaboration is critical all the time, but even more critical today. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, moving right along. Thank you, Ms. Ari. Moving right along to board comments. Ms. Stone?
I don't have anything this evening. Thank
Okay.
you.
Ms. Pingrelli? Yep. Ms. Sierra Martinez?
Yes, 2 comments. First, I want to personally thank Miss Emily Edwards, who helped co-facilitate the parent meeting. Dr. Reynolds, you were in attendance, and President Sandoval, so were you. It continues to be a valuable lesson in how we move our district forward. I know it's a future agenda item, but one thing I continue to hear loud and clear is that our parents want access to us in an informal environment to learn and grow together. So thank you to our parents that attended. I sent an email with some updates that we're always looking for new ways, as this is brand new to our district. And thank you. One other piece I would like to add, I also sit on the Arizona Council of Economic Education, and they hosted Teaching for Economic Equity. It was a teacher panel. We had some PUSD educators in attendance, and we constantly talk about the importance of finance, and what I heard during this presentation and our teachers engaging is how do we help our children plan and budget for a crisis? Not just saving for a car, that might not even be in their realm, but getting to them and how are they helping their families plan for these emergencies. And that was good to hear as we're all experiencing these financial crises together. So kudos to Arizona Council of Economic Education inviting our teachers and in attendance. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. For me, I have a few. So yesterday I had the opportunity to attend the Centennial High School girls golf tournament, and who were victorious. Peoria was out there along with Kellis, but I just really want to give a shout out to Coach Bauer out there at Centennial. I think, in addition to teaching the game of golf to these young women, it was clear that she was also teaching those life skills that are important, for our kids as they leave our walls as a district. I mean, you saw the ethics of golf, from integrity and honesty and collaboration and teamwork. It was just it shined through. So I wanted to make sure that I gave a shout out to Ms. Bauer, and then I wanted to chat a little bit about the Liberty Sunrise football game that took place, last Friday. I attended that. It was a little different, right? Due to the times that we're going in, we've all kind of been asked to kind of, adapt and make some changes, for the greater good. And so it was usually a well-attended game, and it was a little bit quieter, but the focus was still on, again, the students that were out there playing the game. The coaches were still fired up, and the kids were still, working together to come out victorious. So despite the changes with the band out there and the cheerleaders, you still saw a lot of school spirit, and still saw that same drive and charge as it relates to the impact of athletics on our kids, the positive impact. So just a great week, with a couple of the visits that I've had. So just great opportunities. Dr. Reynolds.
Thank you very much, President Sandoval, Governing Board, our guests, Cabinet. Welcome this evening. Just a few comments. Here at Peoria Unified, we are grateful for all the support we receive from our community and our local businesses. Our HP Real Estate Group recently donated to 3 of our elementary schools. Cheyenne and Coyote Hills both received a $500 donation, and Oasis Elementary received 2 $500 donations, totaling $2,000 to our elementary schools. Our schools are sure to put these donations to good use, and we want to thank RHP Real Estate for their generosity and ongoing support of Peoria Unified and our schools, especially during these very difficult times. Last week, the Met Professional Academy hosted their annual open house. While this year's event was facilitated in a virtual manner, like most of our events, it was a great way for prospective high school students to get inside and look at the courses and the unique experience that the Met has to offer. Thank you to Barb Coakley and her whole team at the Met for putting on this great event and for working with prospective students. So we appreciate them. And lastly, speaking of virtual events, today we hosted our annual fall field trip. If you remember, typically we would get one of our big yellow school buses, and we would put people on it and drive around and look at the amazing programming that we've got and meet some great people, teachers, administrators, students from around the district. This year, obviously, we were unable to do that, so we hosted it virtually. So our community was able to take a virtual tour through Desert Harbor Elementary School and Ironwood High School to see all the great things that they are offering and represent all of our schools. This event has always served as a positive informational experience for parents and community members, local business owners, to get a good look inside what takes place on our school campuses each and every day. I'd like to thank Principal Becky Burhow, Assistant Principal Janae Hutchison from Desert Harbor, and Principal Russ Dunham from Ironwood for helping us put this all together. So it was a great event. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, President Sandoval.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, and thank you for bringing that up. I mean, Ms. Ari and team and all who are involved in putting together the virtual field trip. I think both sites, Desert Harbor and Ironwood, did a great job of really talking about really why behind families seek out the Peoria Unified School District. So great job. Thank you for that. Okay, moving along to public comments. Request to address the governing board regarding matters not included on the agenda. The green slips that I have in front of me are for an agenda item, what was previously 9.3. So with that said, we'll pause on public comment until we get to that line item. We will read or allow you to speak at that point after we go through the presentation and before we have any board comments around that subject. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. Does any board member have any item to pull from the consent? Ms. Dillon?
No, thank you.
Ms. Pingrelli? Nope. Sorry. Ms. Sierra Martinez?
I think this is the first time no.
All right, I don't either. So I do need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I approve it. I approve. I move that we approve the consent agenda.
At that. Ms. Contra, we have a motion by Ms. Doan and a second by myself. Board members, please place your votes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't turn my phone off.
Motion passes 4-0, one absent, and I apologize for not making this announcement at the beginning. Ms. Underhill will not be with us this evening. Okay. We have no action items this evening, so we'll get into our discussion items. 9, which is now, well, we'll get to 9.1, which is mass protocols. Ms. Contra, do I have that right? Did it switch? Did it move from 9.3 to 9.1, or?
Yes, sir, President Sandoval, it did. If you refresh your screen.
Okay.
But it will probably take you out. So yes, it is now 9.1.
Perfect. All right. Mass protocols. So that said, I believe we have Mr. Gay.
Well, good evening, President Sandoval, members of the governing board, Dr. Reynolds, colleagues, and guests. The purpose of my presentation this evening is to provide you with a description of our policy and protocols regarding face coverings for staff and students. It almost goes without saying that the subject of face masks or face coverings within the context of the COVID-19 pandemic has been a major part of local and national conversations for the better part of 8 months. Early on, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention issued guidance regarding face coverings. The CDC subsequently published guidance specifically for K-12 education administrators regarding the wearing of masks in schools. I will refer to this guidance again later. And as a quick summary, I can say that here at the Peoria Unified School District, we have implemented state and local directions. We published our return to school plan on our Peoria Unified School District website, public website, on July 1st, and updated it again on September 17th. And it contains specific text directing the wearing of cloth face coverings while on district properties. And then we also published the Safe 7, which is a graphic that was published primarily for staff, and it was published in late June, and it also contains text that describes the requirement for wearing face coverings. There are several documents that provide guidance and direction that have and continue to inform our protocols. The CDC published its recommendations regarding the wearing of face masks in schools. Let me bring that up. In the form of guidance. It, as do each of these documents that I'm going to show, acknowledges the need for exemptions or exception protocols. Maricopa County published what it calls its amended regulations requiring face coverings in Maricopa County on June 6th of this year. And it essentially says that all persons that live in or visit the county must wear a face covering when in public. On July 22nd, the county took another step and issued its recommendations for use of face coverings in the school setting. That was on July 22nd. Now, both the county documents specify practices that are consistent with the CDC guidelines. And then on July 23rd, Governor Ducey issued Executive Order number 2020-51. It's called Arizona Open for Learning. And numbered paragraph 5 of that executive order orders all school districts and charter schools to develop and implement policies to require the wearing of face coverings for all staff and students. Now, the order goes on to specify that those policies must include exception protocols and that school practices must be consistent with CDC guidance. And then in late August, the Arizona School Board Association developed and recommended 2 staff regulations that I'll talk about in just a minute. And for those that don't know, the Arizona School Board Association publishes its policy manual, and nearly all school districts in Arizona adopt that manual, sometimes making small changes, but adopt the manual, which contains policies, regulations, and exhibits. And so, as I said, Peoria Unified School District did adopt those 2 regulations. Now, the 2 regulations are GBGB-R, which pertains to staff, and JICA-RB, which pertains to students. Now, policy GBGB is the policy for staff, personnel, security, and safety, and the -R regulation implements that policy. JICA is our policy that addresses student dress. Regulation RB is one of 2 regulations that implement that policy. Now, they're both worded the same, and so I'm going to describe them basically at the same time. What I've done is I've quoted the main parts of the regulation that apply really to our conversation this evening. And if you'll permit me to read this first part of the quote. In compliance with local, state, and/or federal mandates, all persons, including but not limited to staff, students, vendors, visitors, and volunteers, shall wear a cloth face covering while on any district property, in any district facility, at any district event, whether indoors or outdoors, and in district vehicles, including district buses or vehicles rented or leased by the district. Now, the quote goes on to talk about essentially exceptions. The first part of that is it says who's not to wear face coverings. So the first of that is children under the age of 2, anyone who has trouble breathing, and anyone who is unconscious, incapacitated, or otherwise unable to remove the mask without assistance. Now, this wording is identical to wording that's in the governor's executive order as well as the CDC guidance. And then finally, in this quote, it says that the superintendent may make exceptions to the requirement to wear a cloth face covering while keeping in mind the health and safety of everyone involved. Now, I'm going to describe our protocols for these exceptions on this next slide. As required by the governor's executive order and in consultation with our own legal counsel, we implemented the following mask exception or exemption protocols. The word exception and exemption in the various documents tend to be used interchangeably. Now, I start with the exception categories. The first of the two categories are pretty obvious. They are location or activity dependent, so they talk about people who are actively eating or engaging in strenuous outdoor exercise, such as swimming. They're at home, of course, or in a private vehicle, etc. The second category is the one that's more challenging, and it deals with individuals with medical or behavioral conditions that preclude wearing a cloth face covering. Now, when an individual's medical or behavioral situation suggests that an exemption from wearing a cloth face covering may need to be made, we employ one of two formal processes, depending on whether the individual is an employee or a student. Now, these processes are called accommodation processes because essentially what happens is when we encounter an individual that has such a medical or behavioral condition, we strive to work with that individual, if it's a staff member, or with the parents of a student, to arrive at some acceptable accommodation. Now, the formal processes for doing it are the following. For staff, we follow the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, which essentially requires that all employees who have some sort of disability must be allowed to work, and there must be accommodations made so that they can work productively. And then for students, we follow Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Now, for those that don't know, Section 504 addresses specifically students, and it's similar to the ADA regulation in that it basically says that students with some form of disability should be and must be allowed to receive what is technically called a free and appropriate public education. It's often referred to as FAPE, F-A-P-E. Now, that's a very detailed and complicated accommodation process. And so what I'm going to ask is for Dr. Kendra Bell, if she would, to just briefly explain what that process looks like.
Thank you, Mr. Gay. Each school has a 504 coordinator with the site team. They meet with the parent to determine, one, eligibility of the student, as well as two, the accommodation plan for that student. Typical student accommodations in Peoria Unified includes face shields in lieu of the mask, more frequent mask breaks, plexiglass shields at the desk in classrooms, and certainly all K-12 students in Peoria have the option for virtual at-home instruction. We're also seeing across our district for our 504 students modified schedules for in-person learning, modified arrival and dismissal times, as well as social distancing and modified movement to classes with shields. Mr. Gay?
Thank you, Dr. Bell. I've listed those typical accommodations that are made under Section 504. And finally, on this slide, I'll say that allowing a student to attend in-person instruction with no face covering at all and none of the typical accommodations that Dr. Bell talked about is not an acceptable accommodation. That concludes my presentation. I wanted to mention before I turn it over for any questions that you may have that the documents that I described, with the exception of Americans with Disabilities Act and the 504 process, which can be found online, those documents are attached to the board agenda item if you'd like to refer to them. So now I'd like to stand for questions that the board may have.
So, Mr. Gay, before we get into board Q&A, what I'd like to do is hear from the public and those comments, and then we'll call you back up for board commentary. Sound good?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, and I was just going to let you know this gentleman's going to clean the podium for you before you hop up there. So as always, our public comment is limited to 3 minutes per individual, and Ms. Contra will start the timer as you begin your speak. Thank you, sir. Okay, this first public comment comes from Jay Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board, superintendent. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to actually provide a public comment. I've been part of many board meetings in the past, and I've witnessed lots of boards use public comment, deny basically public comment as a basically a threat to the liberty of citizens in the communities that they serve. So it's very important that you do provide this and this opportunity. So my name is Jay Griffin. I am here as an expert in public health licensing, regulation, compliance, and enforcement. I've been working in the Arizona Department of Health Services in licensing for the last 12 years. My specialty is in speech and hearing professionals, both in licensing and also academically. I've been a hearing aid specialist for more than 25 years. I have 2 sons in elementary school and a daughter in high school. Last week, I asked my 6-year-old, who had been wearing masks since being in child care and pupil care and finally actually on campus and in-person learning. I said, what do you think about wearing masks in school? And he says, you know what, I think it's all right, but only if there's coronavirus. And so the reason I say that is just basically as a reminder that the students that you're all educating and that we're all responsible for, they are giving us a lot of grace when it comes to the requirements and the expectations that we put on them in their learning environment. I don't have much time. I want to respond to the presentation that Mr. Gay had just presented as far as the disability ramifications, basically, and accommodations. When you wear a mask, you give your hearers an automatic 15 dB or more hearing loss in speech frequencies. So that affects their comprehension, that affects their ability to understand the speech that you're giving them, and it basically impairs your relationship. So when we require students to wear masks in schools, we're automatically impairing their ability to communicate and learn. So thank you. I wish I had more time to explain further. I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. And I couldn't agree with you more on this line item in the agenda. It's very important to make sure that we hear from our community, so thank you for that. Up next is Miss Michelle Dillard.
Hi, my name is Michelle Dillard. Through the strict enforcement of what you're referring to as a regulation added to the district's dress code policy, JICA-RB, written by the Arizona School Board Association, ASBA, and adopted at the sole discretion of the superintendent, Peoria Unified School District is discriminating against the most vulnerable student population, special needs children. ASBA is merely a membership association for school districts and has no authority over districts or accountability to the community. And the superintendent is tasked with implementing policy, not creating it. While they may think they have found and exploited a legal loophole, JICA-RB does not qualify as a regulation by ASBA's own definition of what a regulation is, which is that a regulation is not a policy and is generally the direction of the superintendent to the staff for the implementation of the policy, meaning the implementation and enforcement of existing board-approved dress code policy, JICA, which made no mention of face coverings at all and only referenced the prohibition of items to maintain a safe and positive learning culture at school. Administration may only issue regulations without prior board approval so long as the administration operates within the guidelines of the policy that was adopted by the board. The superintendent has subverted the authority of the board with his attempt to create new policy under the guise of implementing a regulation. The governing board is not permitted to surrender its duties, and policy creation is the legal responsibility of this board, as set forth in Arizona Revised Statute 15-341. Specifically, Section A1, which reads, "The governing board shall prescribe and enforce policies and procedures for the governance of the schools that are not inconsistent with law or rules prescribed by the State Board of Education." The lack of a district-wide developed and approved face covering policy as required and outlined in Governor Ducey's Executive Order 2020-51 is an epic failure of this governing board. While previous board meetings have presented information from the Arizona Department of Education in Maricopa County, their face covering guidelines were never formally adopted as policy. No face mask policy has been approved by this board. I've heard it implied from various people that the district is following the Maricopa County mask mandate. Maybe even one or two of you has made that claim, but that's a lie and you should stop. You see, Dr. Reynolds has decided that he is smarter and knows better than Governor Ducey, the United States Department of Education Office of Civil Rights, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Arizona Department of Education, the Arizona Department of Health Services, Maricopa County, and the city of Peoria, all of whom recognize the need for medical exceptions. It is the inaction of this board on this matter that has created an environment and culture of discrimination in PUSD, and I encourage you to act immediately to remedy that. The community deserves a transparent process and clear guidelines.
Thank you, Ms. Dillard. Next speaker will be Aaron Rooks.
Hello, my name is Aaron Rooks. I have 3 children and one more about to join the Peoria School District. I'm here today about the mask mandate. We've spoken a lot with you, Mr. Reynolds, about this topic, and we appreciate your time. This whole pandemic has been a disaster for our children, for their learning, for their social interactions. I just want to point out that it's not just about getting sick, it's about mental health also. We have a young son named Emmett, and he has issues with wearing face coverings, issues wearing socks, underwear, certain things like that. It's been a struggle his whole life, and he was doing really well before this pandemic hit. He was putting his socks on by himself. It was no issues. And we were really proud of him. And the pandemic hit, and the loss of structure in school and interactions with other children, it really hurt him. And getting back into school, it's like he took 100 steps backwards. And right now, we're trying to get him back in school. Right now, we're keeping him home right now. We're trying to work through working through a 504 plan with them to try to get them back in school. So I just ask that, Ms. Kendra Bell, I know we received a statement from you, that you would continue to work with us. I'm here today solely to get my son back in school. And not just my son, all children with disabilities. Our older son was just sent home today crying. And now he cannot go to school for 14 days because apparently he's been exposed to a young child that has been tested positive for COVID. His first response to my wife was, I thought I was wearing my mask. I did everything. My older son, he does everything to the book, and he followed all the protocols. He doesn't understand. Now he's scared. He's crying. He misses school. The pandemic was also hard on him. He misses his friends. And now this is just another blow to our children who want to stay in school. And I appreciate everyone's time. And on the fact of desk with plexiglass, we weren't told that was an option when we started our journey with this. But now I'm glad that it is an option now. I just ask that you continue to work with us and get our children back in school. Thank you for everyone's time.
Thank you, Mr. Rooks. Next speaker is Heather Rooks.
Good evening. My name is Heather Rooks. I'm in here on behalf of my son Emmett, a second grader at Vistancia Elementary. I have 3 children who attend Vistancia, 2 of which are special needs, and until recently, my experience with the school was great. Unfortunately, Emmett's academic world dramatically changed when he was told to wear a mask on his first day of school. See, my son is autistic. After verifying with the school nurse the Friday before first in-person school day that an exemption letter from his psychiatrist would be accepted, my 7-year-old son was left confused and distraught. No one from school or the district called me that morning to let me know that his mask exemption would be denied. My son was forced to wear a mask and had told his teacher, "My mommy said I didn't have to." The opportunity to prepare my son and have a discussion with him regarding a mask was taken from me because of a new school policy, a policy that came from the district office. How is this okay in an elementary school in the Peoria district? As y'all know, the CDC, Maricopa County, and Peoria have allowed mask exemptions for those with developmental disabilities. My son Emmett was given an exemption by the attending physician psychiatry department at Phoenix Children's Hospital. I have met with his physician who has made his position clear that virtual learning is not an option and a forced facial covering would cause substantial more harm than good. Emmett tried to comply with the new district policy, but each day that passed, he became more distraught. After only 5 days, he began to show signs of regression, significant anxiety, and developed a negative association attending school and wearing a mask. The last day he was at school was September 25th, and I watched my son cry and begged me to take him back to the car because he was afraid of the mask. That day was awful as a mother to see my son afraid and traumatized to something he shouldn't be wearing. I could not allow as a mother to allow this to continue because I am Emmett's protector and I am his advocate as his voice is being silenced. This is the United States of America. Where are Emmett's rights? I have recently learned that the district policy change did not come from the CDC. It came from the Maricopa. It did not come from Maricopa or the Peoria mask regulations, but rather from an Arizona School Board Association. At what point did the local school board association become the authority over both the physical and mental well-being of children? At what point did the district no longer consider or care about the well-being of my child? At what point did it become okay for a superintendent to make medical decisions behind closed doors with only the district attorney? My son is having consequences associated with covering his face and is suffering these consequences because of a virus. I hope the members of the board are willing to use some common sense to think rationally and stand up for students whose disabilities have been blatantly thrown under the bus. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Rooks. Up next is Wendy, is it Van Wy or Van Wee? Van Wee. Thank you.
So I'm more of an off-the-cuff person. I don't have a prepared speech, but there are some things that I would like to read to you and share some statistics. And Heather, my heart is hurting for you. I apologize. I'm here not because I don't want my kid to wear a mask. She wears a mask proudly. She is amongst the one that now she can't go to school because a volleyball team member has supposed COVID, and now no more volleyball, and she has to stay home. She wants to go to school. Online learning for her is not ideal. If the mask works, why does she have to stay home? Fine, no volleyball, I get it. It's close contact. Let me back up a second. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I apologize, Mr. Sandoval. I'm a very kind person, I promise, but I'm very heated and very passionate when I believe in something. So I apologize, so thank you for your time, all of you. I want to give you guys two definitions. First one is the definition of guidance or guidelines. A statement or other indication of policy or procedure by which to determine a course of action. Not written in stone, right? It's guardrails. You are giving guidance that says, hey, this is what you should do. Let me read you the second definition, common sense. Sound and prudent judgment based on a simple perception of the situation and facts. So if you know the situation, you know the facts, you all are very intelligent. You all have probably way higher degrees than I do. I'm just an insurance agent who knows how to read contract and decipher a contract. CDC, as of yesterday in the state of Arizona, 5,854 deaths in the state of Arizona. Does anybody want to take a guess at under the age of 20 years, how many people under the age of 20 years old died in Arizona from this supposed virus? Does anybody throw out a number? 9. 9 people under the age of 20 have died from this virus. Doesn't make it any less. I'm very sorry for those folks. That's not the point. If the mask is working and only 9 folks have died under the age 20, why is my kid not allowed to at least go to school? I get not playing volleyball, but why can't she go to school? Suicide is the second leading cause of death between the ages of 10 and 34 years old. Guess what? It's increased 31% since 2001. I have websites I can refer to you so that you can see where I got this and cite my work. I get it. I apologize. I am so sorry that you are on a governing board at this time. This pandemic has changed everybody's lives. We have been upheaval of everything, traveling, family gatherings, everything. It's mentally exhausting and it's mentally drained. You are here for our children. Please just use your, I'm not discounting you. Use the common sense, please. I apologize for going over.
No. Next public comment is from Devin Updegraff Day.
All right, board members, superintendent, thank you for listening. I'm here tonight to discuss the district's dress code policy regarding the mask exemptions in particular. My objective is to crack the protective shield known as policy. Of course, we're living in unprecedented times. In fact, I learned yesterday that apparently we can't dance in public anymore. So we're officially living in a footloose reality. I bring up this example of a policy guideline mandate. Doesn't matter what terminology you use, the outcome is the same and the meaning is the same. These guidelines are simple and self-justification to allow one to hide behind the facade of public health and safety. And somewhere along the line, we have lost the human perspective. Now, I figured I would kind of go through the CDC and Maricopa since that is the structure that everybody's following, and some things that I think were missed. Example, the CDC recognizes that wearing masks is not suitable for every child and every situation, and it can exacerbate mental and physical harm. So an autistic child, for example, self-harm, we're talking head banging to the point of unconsciousness. I have friends that have treated them in the emergency department. Scratching, punching, biting. When we talk about agitated with an autistic child, it is not a temper tantrum. For those with mental health and sensory disabilities, administrators and teachers should consult with a parent. Obviously, we know that didn't happen. We know other parents, that did not happen. They were not notified. In fact, they were told the mask exemption would be accepted, only to find out that the district had put on a mask on their child's face. Some people with disabilities, mental health conditions, and other sensory sensitivities should consult with their healthcare provider, not a healthcare provider, not an expert panel, definitely not a stakeholder committee, their doctor. Maricopa County Public Health, under special population, individuals with a medical behavioral condition and disability, unable to wear covering, recommend one individual can wear a mask. That would be in this situation of a child with disability, the teacher and the peers, assuming they are all following the mandates, that child with a disability would be fine according to Maricopa Public. Now, we've listed the Arizona School Board Association as a reference, and we've all seen kind of the dress code policy. What medical authority does that association have over public health and safety? How do they have the authority to go over a medical doctor's orders? Now, these has to be exceptions. This is medicine. We have entered the medical world when you are overriding a medical doctor's orders. And there are exceptions to every rule, especially when it comes to the human body and children. Do not put everybody in a box. You have to allow for exceptions. It's about common sense and compassion. Do not put the few and brush them away for the many. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Updegraff. Okay, board member comments, questions, Ms. Stone? Mr. Gay, and I think you're fine there, honestly.
I would like to say I am personally discouraged by the amount of time it is taking to resolve issues for our children that need something now. You know, my daughter has Down syndrome and autism. Her caseworker informed me that she does not, that she's exempted. She doesn't have to wear a mask anywhere. I don't pretend to be a medical specialist, but I don't understand why it is unacceptable to not have some kind of face covering amongst children where the risk is so small. And I mean, I've been through all this before with you people. You wonderful, hardworking, dedicated people. I would like to see more it just needs, these are special needs children. These are special needs individuals. They need special attention. They don't need to be stuck in a system. Systems don't work. Individuals do. And especially amongst young people, they need that peer association. I know that, you know, as parents, we see this in our kids, that immediate kick to fit in as far as learning goes. It's much greater when they're amongst peers. You can sit down and teach a child all day long, but they'll learn it so much faster when they see other children doing it in that setting. And it's disheartening to see how long it's taking us to put in place some things for these children that need so desperately our help. And I believe that the hearts here are with these students. I'm not gonna say that, you know, we're not being concerned, but I think that the pandemic and the busyness of running a large district has hurt our perception on what needs to be done for our special needs children. They don't, I mean, okay, people say, oh, I understand, but they don't help. And what these children need is help. I'm not sure from all this talk and all this investigation, I mean, there's a lot of obfuscation. There's a lot of room to make things one way or the other. Personally, the things I've read lead me to believe the masks don't do anything anyway, unless they're even higher grade than what nurses are wearing in the hospital. They don't stop the COVID. Can go around. It's airborne. You know, that's what I understand. I also understand that we have to follow local mandates and things like that. But there needs to be somebody there that can deal with these issues with the parents, with the child, and get it done. It needs to be done quickly. And children are why we're here. Our local community trusts us with their children. Their children are their greatest treasure. Mine are my greatest treasure. I love my children, love my granddaughter. I haven't met a kid yet that I couldn't love, all right? Mr. Gay, I appreciate that presentation, and it did give me a little further understanding. But I want to focus on getting something done now for these people. If there's an issue, and if a child has, I don't understand why we can't let a child go off without a mask. If they're crying, a little child, and you're going to force them to, I don't see how that's helping. I really don't. I don't see how that helps. I don't understand how it makes anybody healthier. And I guess that's just my position. I'm in a hurry for the governor to pull the mask mandate. I think it's done. But until we have something we can deal with, we need to jump on it and take care of our children, take care of those with special needs.
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Ms. Pingerelli?
Well, thank you. I just wanted to thank President Sandoval and Mrs. Underhill for putting this. I asked for this agenda item last meeting, and I appreciate you putting it on so quickly. Since we've been back in school, the main, I think, majority of the emails have been over masks and mask exemptions. I think the foremost on my mind is that every student and faculty, staff, and families feel safe. I mean, school's supposed to be a safe place. Throughout this pandemic, and I wrote a couple of things down because I don't want to forget anything. Throughout this pandemic, I believe the aim is to do whatever we can to accommodate everyone to the best of our ability. We are now facing a number of challenges and concerns over mask usage. So we need to talk about it, and I appreciate the dialogue this evening. I just wanted to talk about four different areas. First, the reason I put it on is to inform the community on what our current safety protocols are in place. Ensure that students with a disability having exemption from wearing a mask are accommodated. And I think that most of us agree that the best place for education to take place, particularly for younger students, is in the classroom, face-to-face. Next, I wanted to talk about inform the public regarding legal issues regarding the use of masks. And then I wanted to allow the public to express their opinion and concerns. So with that, I have a couple of questions. I wanted to, and I have been speaking with Emmett's mom for a while. She's reached out, I think, to all board members. How many students do we have with special needs, or any student that is requesting a mask mandated 504?
Thank you for that question, Ms. Pingerelli. I don't have that data for you right now at my fingertips, but I can get that for you.
Okay. You know, with talking with Heather, I mean, it seems like we're so close to being able to make that accommodation. I know it's going further. But it's not just, I mean, Heather's here to speak out for her son, but she's speaking out for all students with disabilities within the district. And so I appreciate your time in coming here. When students are in the classroom, I know we've laid a lot of different things out. We have hand washing stations. To me, washing your hands and is one of the most important things. How are the schools laid out in terms of, I know we've added additional hand washing stations, sanitizing, you're shaking your head, yes, no? Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Pingarelli. If you can hear me through this. Most of our classrooms have sinks for students to wash their hands. We also have stationed throughout the schools sanitizing stands, essentially, and they're things you put your hand under and pump, and it gives you hand sanitizer. And then we also have made available for all the schools 12-ounce bottles of hand sanitizer that the teachers can keep at their desks and let students use. They can position them by the door when the students come and go to lunch and recess and so forth.
All right, thank you. You know, school is, as I said, is a safe place. It's supposed to be a safe place, but we need to get every student back into school that wants to be there. That's my position.
Thank you, Ms. Pingarelli. Ms. Sam Martinez.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gay, for the information. I always appreciate adding the documentation for the public to review policies as we are going through this process together. And a special thank you to the parents. During this pandemic, we've had to be vulnerable and share parts of our lives that we thought we would never share publicly. And for that, I recognize. It's difficult when you have a special needs child and when you're working with agencies like developmental disabilities and they're telling you one thing that you can have an accommodation, or raising special kids and you can have an accommodation, and then you go to an organization that says no. We've talked many times, Dr. Reynolds, and I'm still having a hard time understanding Peoria's way of doing things in regards to policies and regulations. Can you walk me through how we got to that point? And just some background information as I post other school districts, how they handled the mask mandate. Everybody did it differently. Some school districts right away put it on the policy. That's the board's responsibility. We didn't, and we can own that. It's the board's responsibility to put it on agenda, and not once did we do that. But there are other school districts like we did who put in a regulation. So for our background knowledge, can you help me fill the gaps?
Yeah, so we followed, as the regulation came in from, as a recommendation, we followed our practice, which is to inform the board of the regulation through the reporting process that we use with the governing board. And that's the difference between a policy. A policy comes to the board for two reads. The regulations come to the board through our Friday reporting process to communicate to them. And then, of course, the board has opportunities to provide feedback to the superintendent or team through that process.
So what I hear is the approach we took in implementing mask mandate was merely as a result of past practices and a regulation, through a regulation process. I'm just trying to.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I understand your question. Yes. As when regulations come in as recommendations, we notify the board through that process.
Okay. Thank you. And based on your experiences, why did we go about being in a COVID environment, in a crisis environment? Why did you believe that was the best approach and not changing policy?
Well, that was based on recommendations from legal counsel. It came through conversations with other superintendents as we talked about which processes to follow. So when I ask questions, for instance, through some of the networking groups that superintendents have. We all followed a similar process when it came through how we adopted the mask regulation.
Thank you for that. As I am processing this information, and I will stand as I have always stood, was back in July, my biggest concern was the back and forth of kids going back. They need structure and they need consistency. And what I heard tonight is something that we all hear, of students being identified as infected by COVID, and then we have a plethora of students having to be quarantined for what I consider a short period of time if I look at the big picture. Do we know how many students are currently in quarantine?
I'll look over and ask one of our members of our COVID response team.
President Sandoval, Mrs. Seja Martinez, we would have to pull that information to send to you.
Okay, now, if I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, last week in the last board meeting was about 200 students. Are we close to that? Did I hear that somewhere, or is that totally off guard? Okay, so don't quote that at all. That's a misinformation. So I'm just trying to think about, one of my biggest concerns was the risk, and as a decision maker, being informed with reducing the probability of people being infected. The reality is we don't have a cure at this point, unless within the next hour there's been one. We don't know the long-lasting effects, the impact to how that changes lives going forward. So for me, the decision has been made, left to you, to create a medical task force. Where does our medical task force stand with this topic?
So I've talked with them about how we come to what is the appropriate accommodations, and we've discussed using the 504 process. I talked with them about that, explain what that is. Obviously, many of the members are familiar with what Section 504 is and means, and they were very comfortable with us using that process to determine what are appropriate accommodations.
As I think through this, and if this board is serious about addressing the mask mandate then, and how it applies to this district, it may be something that this board would like to discuss the actual policy and not have a regulation. That would be a call to action at the end of this board meeting to bring up policy, I believe it's JICA. With that being said, I appreciate the approach and being transparent. I know we've talked about this since the very beginning. We also communicated to our parents what going back to school would look like. I'm still having a hard time with the communication of telling our parents it's been approved, and then they're showing up and being caught off guard. That is the worst experience for a staff member or a parent to work through. So what have we learned since that, and what are we doing to make changes going forward that doesn't happen?
Yeah, so there's no doubt, as I've talked with the Rooks family, that miscommunication was not handled well, and so we have reached out through both Dr. Bell's office and through our task force to make sure that our schools are able to communicate effectively what those expectations are, and if there is a request for accommodations, that our families know what that process is.
And how are you measuring that the changes are creating a positive experience for our parents or students? Through an after call, through a follow-up? How do you know that those changes are working?
We would recognize that the changes are not working if there is further miscommunication, and the way that we know that is when families let us know that miscommunication has taken place.
And just looking at our whole experience in PUSD is, to me, and I perceive that as a reactive approach, and I would like to consider a proactive approach on gathering that information as communication continues to be top of mind in this environment. Without a doubt, the board has ownership in delineating between policy and regulation, and we'll see how this board decides to move forward with that. I am sensitive to special needs as well, and would like to request the same data in regards to students with IEPs and 504s, recognizing that that data is protected. So some of the data is protected on student information. When I think about my professional experience about accommodations, whether it be the workforce or for our children, I think two things come to mind. One, what is reasonable accommodations, not only for that student or that adult, but the reasonable accommodations of impacting others around them, their health. And what I would like to also know is the consistency. So with the data that is provided, how are you regulating consistency with upholding those accommodations? Because what you do for one, and if I'm hearing correctly, we have students without masks. Is that accurate? Or not? No?
I think
Ms. Pardon me, Ms. A.R. Martinez, we do have a very small number of special needs children who are in, yes, in special ed programs in which the rooms are, the number of students in the rooms are such that we can maintain social distancing. These are students that physically cannot wear the mask.
So
it's a
I appreciate
impossibility.
I appreciate that, Mr. Gay. So then looking at those options, if we're making those exceptions, then those situations be offered to those students who cannot make those masks. So I just want to ensure consistency and that was option offered to all our parents or all our students who couldn't wear the masks, if that's an option. Is that?
I'm sorry. And you're referring to making sure that every family is aware that we have that 504 process. Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you for that. Without a doubt, we lean on, at least for me when making decisions, legal as the baseline, making sure we're meeting everybody's needs. And then we've asked as a board is what's legal and then doing what we can to exceed and provide the best education experience for the students, recognizing that this is an educational, informative line item in our board agenda. And it appears, for me, my number one goal is to maintain in-person education experience, having our children be in school. And if having masks reduces the risk of spreading COVID, then I would like us to find and go back to our medical task force to show what evidence supports that, and then bring it back to the board as we continue to make informed decisions. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay, thank you. And with that, I stand.
Thank you, Ms. A.R. Martinez. Before I ask my questions, I just want to say to the Rooks family, Ms. Updegraff, Mr. Griffin, Ms. Van der Waai, thank you for taking the time. It is important that you leverage this line item on our agenda to hold us accountable, to make sure that we, are very informed in making global decisions across the district. What you're going through is very real, without question. And there's no doubt, during these trying times, we've all been asked to do things a little bit differently. But when we're talking about, our ESS kids, our students who are most vulnerable, it becomes even more important to lead with others in mind, with compassion, like Ms. Updegraff stated. Ms. San Martinez talked about, we have kind of what's required and what's recommended by law. And I've always stated, we also need to allow our morals, and ethics to have a weighted voice, as we make decisions, without question. With that said, I know you've had a lot of dialogue with the Rooks family, and I know there are some districts that, and I'm not comparing or saying we do what they do, but there are some districts that they're just no, you have to wear a mask. So I do appreciate the district working with the Rooks family to come up with a solution, for their student. I do have a question around, and we talk a lot about leveraging the expertise of the field and certainly our families as we make decisions as a district, right? And this scenario, no different. If we haven't, I would love to see this group here and any others, and maybe Ms. Harper and her team, create, I don't want to call it a task force. I don't want to make it, that formal, but at least a group of individuals which will, allow us to really think about, our, really uphold our promise of our mantra, which is every student, every day, right? How do we, adapt, still ensure an error on not compromising the health and wellness of any of our kids, while still, making sure that their students are, ESS kids, et cetera, most vulnerable students are put into a position to be successful as well. So I would love to see, some type of collaboration convening, where we can make, informed decisions moving forward. Not saying that, we haven't made good, sound decisions, but how can we make sure that they're informed and really include the voices, of our parents that we have here today and others for that matter. That said, I just, these are trying times without question. And again, I can't imagine what everybody is going through. I know as a district, I think it was Dr. Reynolds might have said it earlier, and actually, Mr. Brooks, I think it was you that said it earlier about just wanting to work with one another to make good, sound decisions. And, that's something that I hope for that we can do, and to make sure that we make, again, just relevant decisions on behalf of our ESS kids and our most vulnerable kids. Now, going to the policy question and regulation, one thing I do want to, and I'm open to the conversation without question, but when we talk about policy, there are certain processes that we go through, right? We have to go through 2 readings, right, around policy. And I think if we go in that direction, I think that potentially could limit us and be able to make decisions on the fly on behalf of, our kids, right? Where we'd have to pause and then have 2 readings before we can make a decision on mass or whatever it is. It's been so fluid since, I guess March, of the end of the last academic year, that I feel that we need to be able to allow the district to make decisions on the fly on behalf of our families very quickly versus having to go through 2 readings. So just something to think about, as we have that conversation. Dr. Reynolds.
No, thank you for bringing that up, and that is one of the reasons why you have regulations. Is exactly that that you're able to adjust and make decisions as a district team, but then not requiring multiple reads, which could take potentially a month to be able to react to a situation. And so that is why you have regulation. One of the reasons why you have regulation.
President Sandoval?
Yes, ma'am.
You brought something to my attention that this gentleman, I apologize, I don't have your name written down, but you brought up something on the front line, our experts that are working with our students. I am aware the challenges that masks bring, but I also am aware that some classrooms have had the ability to overcome them. For example, we've had donations, monies, speakerphone systems put into classrooms to help magnify a teacher's voice. With the muffling, I know I experience it on the day-to-day. Where are we at? Do we have schools that have the funds for that technology? Are we looking into that feature to help magnify teachers' voices? You'll just have to yell.
I will just have to yell. I don't think there it is. Yeah, so when we have situations, we don't have currently a practice in place where we do that in each and every classroom. But we have teachers across the district who are using a variety of tools. And I would look over to Dr. Bell if she wants to address any of this more specifically. But we do have, when you walk into classrooms and teachers have students in class that require, you may have seen some teachers using the mask that has the clear window, I guess is what I would call it. You have times where students or those who are working with a child to wear a face shield for a period of time, or to use the plexiglass barriers to be able to work with that when we have students who need to be able to see a teacher's lips or staff member.
When the information comes back, can we get an inventory included in the list? Like how many classrooms have the microphones? How many, a pulse check of how many teachers are using the visual, just a clear understanding what accommodations we're providing when we are using masks. Does that make sense?
Yes, the reason why I'm looking, that could be somewhat complicated to gather that data, but we can absolutely do it.
And just for more focus, I am interested in the speakerphone systems as my primary. How many classes have that set up?
And you're referring to when it is either required by an IEP or through that 504 process, or
no, just in general. I visited Coyote Hills. They have their first grade classrooms equipped with all the microphones. I visited Country Meadows. They received a grant and had all their classes at the lower levels equipped with that piece of technology. So I would like to know how many classrooms have that equipment.
Okay.
Thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions, comments? Ms. Pingarelli?
I just want to find out for anybody that tested positive and the students that we have in quarantine, how many of those, if they were wearing masks, how many tested positive within that 14 days? So the ones that were surrounding them that were in quarantine, are a lot of those that are in quarantine getting COVID because they were around somebody for over 15 minutes? Do you know what that data is?
I don't think we would have that data readily available this evening. We'd have to look into that.
I'm just wondering how effective, if somebody's wearing a mask, how effective it is in keeping it away from other people, even if they're around them. You know, I know the CDC, I think today changed, it's a total of 15 minutes, even if it's in a few minute spurts. So, but I just wanted to see, how many people that have been quarantined around somebody that tested positive themselves.
And I'm going to just take a second and look over and make sure that our COVID response representatives understand the question.
Mrs. Pingarelli, we can certainly get that information for you. We just don't have it this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Just to add to that, and I'm curious because we did receive an email, Mr. Gay. We thank you for your response. It was very clear to follow. Parents have shared the contact tracing process, and what Mr. Gay described was clear, but it seems to me that that's not the case. And then I saw a superintendent highlighted that the challenges come with when they're outside of school events. That at school, they're wearing masks, but when they go to sporting events or when they have a party or at the park, they're not wearing masks. So how do you delineate when it's school related and when they get COVID outside of school, if that's even an option?
And that would be impossible for us to be able to determine.
So I'd be interested in what data you do share as a result, but just thinking about the behaviors I see in my own neighborhood. So, thank you.
And Ms. Ari, as we search for that data, I think it makes sense, and Dr. Reynolds, correct me if I'm wrong, when we look at the Peoria and Cactus, I think it was JV football where we quarantined some athletes, right? I think we need to also, and in that situation, I'm going to assume if they're on the football team, if they quarantine, what I don't know is, maybe I'll ask this question. Did they just quarantine the kids that were on the field and didn't have masks on? Or how did that work? Because I think we may, if it's a case where the kids didn't have masks on because of the situation or the sport, et cetera, then that, we just need to be sensitive to that data as well. But go ahead, I'll allow you to answer that.
It might be helpful if Ms. Airy or Dr. Davidson, if you'd like to just kind of walk the board through what that process looks like.
President Sandoval, members of the board, guests, and public. So we have what we call the COVID response team that comes together when a case, whether that's an adult or student, is, that information, I guess, is shared at the site level. So the principal would reach out to either Ms. Airy or myself, and we would bring our team together. That team consists of our lead nurse. It consists of myself as well as Ms. Besley in Human Resources, our benefits director, Ms. Airy, and Ms. Dunsey from Community Relations, as well as any other staff member that might be involved in the particular case at the campus or, in this case, district level. So we begin by going over a form that Ms. Airy and her team have created where we simply are just talking about the facts, the information, the who, the where, the what, and so forth, and really try to just to get a good sense of what is in front of us. Part of that piece is to really talk about, when you look at the who, student, adult, and then of course we do have to begin talking about that contact tracing and see if that student or adult was around a particular either group, around a particular student, and that, I think someone mentioned earlier this evening that continues to morph and what close contact looks like. Right now it's within 6 feet, 10 minutes or more, but it's in a cumulative fashion. It's not, it used to be, well, it was just one chunk of time. Now it's cumulative, so it really does open that up to what we have to consider when you look at contact tracing. And I appreciate some of the comments from earlier this evening because common sense does come into play here. So we certainly have to think about using the form, and Ms. Airy, if I'm missing stuff, please hop on. But we have to consider recess. If from a student perspective, we have to consider where did they sit in their regular ed class? Where are they sitting in their special area classes? Did they have special areas? Do they participate in a before or after school program? Who do they sit by at lunch? I mean, there's just so many different variables we have to take into account when thinking about who might have to be quarantined. In an example, Mr. Sandoval, that you may have been referencing, did they all ride a school bus and not wear a mask? Maybe. Those are some things we have to think about when you're considering quarantining students. And certainly the other thing we do, and we ask our administrators at the site level to do, is reach out to our parents and to reach out to the kids themselves. As you know, our older students can certainly give insight into what they're doing, not just at the school level, but to Ms. Ceja Martinez's point, who they're hanging out with during the weekend. Whose house are they spending the night at? What kind of parties are they going to, and so on and so forth. So we really try to take into account the whole scenario as it relates to the case, as well as those that might be involved. And lastly, before I turn it over to Ms. Airy, would be when we choose to act as a team, please note it is on a confirmed case, meaning our administrative team at the site level, for example, will be working closely with our parents to see the documentation from the doctor's office, and our lead nurse, Ms. Alexander, waits to also get the information from the county health department, just to ensure that everything is aligned in that it is a confirmed case. So those are some things from my end that I'd like to highlight. Ms. Airy, anything else you'd like to add? Okay, thank you.
So President Sandoval, just as we keep focused on our mask protocols, it's important that I just want to point out, as you hear that process, and as our community is informed that there's a case within their school, or you're watching our dashboard and seeing where the active cases are, each time we are notified, that process goes into place. And so I appreciate our comments earlier about how difficult this is specifically for our families and our students, but how challenging this is for our teachers and staff and the work that goes into trying to keep our schools open as we navigate through the COVID crisis.
Any other questions?
I do.
Yep, Ms. Zia.
Two, one is a question, one is a request. One, are we only relying on our parents to notify the district that they have received a positive COVID case? Does that question make sense?
We would not have another way to know. I'm looking over at our CRT because we rely heavily on self-reporting, but I'm not sure if the county has a way to let us know that.
They do, Mrs. Ceja Martinez. Most of the time, we receive our information through the school principal, and the families do inform us. Every now and then, there may be a case, because all cases are reported to Maricopa County. Sometimes Maricopa County will reach out to us if through the cases they've received and the interviews that they conduct, that family indicates where that child or a family member goes to school, then they will reach out to us. So we do receive notification from the county as well.
Okay. So it is possible, though, that parents are not sharing the information with us, and so we heavily rely on the relationship with the county.
Yes.
Okay.
And just to be clear, it's not through our testing, through that testing piece, we are not notified. It would be through the investigation process from the county.
That's correct, Dr. Reynolds. So the county, when they get that, every positive case that goes to the county, which is all of them, they then have to complete an interview in addition to the work that we may do to interview that family and to talk through kind of close contacts and things. They also complete an interview, and then we connect with them to ensure that that information is matching up and that the dates that we are given related to quarantines and when students can return to school are all in sync. So it is quite the process.
And seems timely. I'll pause there because I know that we have more questions or another topic. My only other request was, can the board see that form that you go through on a Friday board report? Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Ms. Pingrelli? Ms. Doan?
I do have a request. I would like for you to look at a way to streamline the 504 so that parents can get their kids in school faster and not have to, and somehow, get it out to all the sites that this is a heartbreak in each parent's life, and they need it to be treated with respect and as much compassion, but also, they need to see that the job is getting done and that they're not being put on the back burner. They need to see that. It needs to be understood, and they need to be communicated with regularly. And I know that's time consuming. I know our people are busy. But this is important for our community, and I'd like to see some kind of information on a way to streamline that and get it faster.
Any other questions, comments? Dr. Reynolds, Cabinet, these individuals took the time to bring their comments to us, their concerns, their questions. So I'd like to make sure that we communicate back to them on any of their comments, questions that they've had, and continue to work with the families that we all are to come up with solutions for their children. So thank you again for your comments. We do have a couple more line items in the discussion section. You are more than welcome to stay for those line items, or I can press pause and you guys can go home to your families. Entirely up to you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a great evening. Okay, moving along to what I believe is 9.2, the update on the annual bond and override program. I believe that's probably Ms. Myers.
Indubitably.
Well, good evening, President Sandoval, members of the governing board, and Dr. Reynolds and community. Thank you for the opportunity to present the fiscal year 2020 Maintenance and Operations Override and 2012 Bond Program Update. Tonight, I will review the annual reporting requirements related to the district's current M&O override and bond program and fiscal year 2020 expenditures in each program. The annual report is part of the perspective of stewardship of community resources, which is part of the district's strategic plan. School districts are required by statute to provide an annual update on maintenance and operations overrides and bond program expenditures and remaining available funds at a public meeting between the dates of September 1st and October 31st each year. Tonight's presentation meets that annual requirement. Maintenance and operation expenditures are where most of the day-to-day expenditures take place for the district. This includes salaries, employee benefits, supplies, utilities, transportation, special education costs, and other operational expenditures that are not of a capital nature. Maintenance and operations funds cannot rather be used to build a school or to renovate and repair buildings and campus infrastructure. Arizona revised statutes and the legislature allows a public school district to ask its community to approve an annual M&O budget increase through an override election to support positions and programs that may not be possible utilizing the funding that is received from the state of Arizona each year. Arizona revised statutes allow an M&O override Arizona revised statutes allow an M&O override to exceed the maintenance and operations budget up to 15% of the revenue control limit. The Peoria Unified School District currently has a 13% M&O override in place that is supported through secondary property taxes within the district and was approved by our community in November of 2015. Once approved, an M&O override is authorized for up to 7 years, of which the district is currently in year 5. If a school district wants to extend the override beyond the original term, the override must be reapproved by the voters. If not reapproved, the override begins to phase out 1/3 of the budget funding in year 6, 2/3 in year 7, and it is fully eliminated in year 8. The current 13% M&O override funds positions and programs, including assistant principals, nurses, and healthcare providers at all of our campuses, athletics, PE, and extracurricular activities, band, choir, and art, as well as gifted and reading programs throughout the district. In addition, the funding also assists the district in maintaining its class size, providing compensation to attract and retain quality teachers and staff, and it also provides funding for all-day kindergarten, as the state only provides a half day of funding to the district. In fiscal year 2020, the M&O override provided $27.8 million of additional M&O funding for positions and programs. With voter approval, public school districts may issue bonds, which are purchased by investors to fund projects that have a useful life that's longer than 5 years. Project examples include building improvements, HVAC or air conditioning and heating, roofing and lighting, technology, school buses or equipment, to name a few. Bonds are repaid over time, a set time period and at a set interest rate. In November of 2020, Peoria Unified's community approved a $180 million bond authorization for the district to manage district-wide elementary and high school renovations, to purchase student transportation vehicles, staff and instructional technology purchases, as well as to support our district support facilities. The bond authorization is also funded through secondary property taxes from residential and commercial properties within the district, and annual tax rates are published as part of the district's budget adoption each year. In fiscal year 2020, bond program-related expenditures totaled $9.8 million. A bond authorization is in effect for 10 years, and there's a general expectation that bond proceeds from bond sales will be expended within 3 years of the sale. There was one final bond sale in July of 2019 that used the final $17.4 million of unsold bond authorization. At this time, there are no additional bond sales that can take place within the 2012 bond authorization that was approved by the voters. The district is required to track expenditures by bond pamphlet category. In fiscal year 2020, $6.4 million were expended for elementary school renovations, $1.4 million for high school projects, $1.5 million for buses, $312,000 on technology expenditures, and $150,000 on administrative facilities repairs and maintenance, for a total of $9.8 million in expenditures for the year. In fiscal year 2020, district elementary school bond expenditures included heating and air conditioning projects, concrete repairs, building, office and door renovations, flooring, and fire alarm replacements. In addition, in fiscal year 2020, projects also included land improvements and fencing for security, parking lot renovations, and roofing projects. At the high schools in the fiscal year 2020, bond projects included front office security upgrades, fencing upgrades, athletic gym repairs, fire alarm upgrades, flooring, and roofing projects. Additionally, in the last fiscal year, bond expenditures included technology purchases and student and regular and special education student transportation vehicles. In addition, there were built-in fire alarm and security system upgrades at 2 of our district support facilities. Preliminary projects for the next fiscal year include priority and essential projects like security and safety upgrades, roofing, plumbing, parking lot renovations, as well as the purchase of student buses and transportation vehicles. Secondary property taxes on residential and commercial properties in the Peoria Unified School District support the 13% M&O override and 2012 bond authorization. In fiscal year 2020, secondary tax rate was set at $2.9423 per $100 of limited assessed valuation. This concludes the annual bond and M&O override program presentation. At this time, I am available to answer your questions or to receive comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Myers. Board members, questions, comments? Ms. Doan?
Thank you, Ms. Myers.
Ms. Pigrelli? Ms. Martinez?
I do have one. Thank you, Ms. Myers and team. I know this is a lot of work. I did receive some positive feedback on the proposed bond request because it was broken down by school and how much X amount of dollars. For the 2012 bond, do you have a document that you're housing somewhere that shows that just by school site and how much we've spent on each school site?
President Sandoval, this is Seha Martinez. In fact, this slide right here demonstrates what was presented in the original pamphlet that was sent to our community as a voter information pamphlet for the November 2015 election. And by statute, these categories and definitions and dollar amounts by category is what the district is required to adhere to. So yes, it is in the historical voter information pamphlet and is presented on this slide.
I appreciate that. And then just going back, just learning from some of the positive experiences is that there's the minimum of what's required by law, and then hearing some positive feedback with our current option of line item by school site, because everybody wants to know what's in it for me. Where are those dollars happening at my own local school site? Something to consider in the future. I know this bond is pretty much spent and accounted for, but it was a very good experience, based on the emails that I received, that they could see line item by school site. So, food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Ms. Myers, thank you very much for the report. Yeah, as always, you and your team. Okay, moving on to 9.3, health data update. Mr. Moss.
Pardon? Yeah, no. No,
Time timing it.
I'm sorry that it buzzes at the wrong time. I apologize. President Sandoval, members of the board, this is our biweekly informational, gives you some information on our COVID data for the last few weeks. I give you these same pictures as we've seen in the past. You can see that we've had two reports since we talked about last. We've gone from 44 to 62, 3.4 to 3.6. I think that this information, when you look at it, it kind of gives you a, I don't know what that means kind of a picture, because they fluctuate a little bit. And I think that's why we keep the graphs in there. And I think the graphs, are much more visible terms in terms of what's happening across the district. And so I'm going to move to those, because the number of cases, while you see it fluctuate a little bit, if you go back and find the 9/5 date and you look at the 9/17 date, the trend line is really the important piece that's happening there. And as across the district, we're getting an increase in cases. It's not different than what's happening across the state. It's not different than what's there. We talked about that being an expectation that it was going to occur, and it is occurring in terms of what we've talked about. When you get to percentage of positive tests, again, we're in the same situation, and I've learned as you work with data, is that if you take a look at 9/12, which was our lowest number, and you look at our current number, and you take a look at the idea that on 9/26 and on 10/3, we got some additional tests that were added that were found from way back when and put into that time period. And so we kind of skewed that number a little bit. We still see a little bit of an uptick there from below 3. We're all the way up to 3.68 as it currently goes through, as it currently is measured for this from today. When you take a look at hospitalizations, again, we were flat for a long time there at 2%. We bumped up to 3% for the last 2 weeks. And so we're getting some information, again, as you read in the newspapers all the way along, that we are getting an increase in the state. We are getting an increase across the country. There are more cases that are being reported and more cases that are popping up. Okay? In addition, and we look at some of the information, we do have some individual hotspots within our district. The 85305 zip code has some significant increases. 85381, I give you some reference. Estancia area has seen a significant increase in the number of cases, and so we're watching those very closely. 85305, by the way, is Kellis High School. 85381 is the schools around Centennial High School. Those areas have seen a significant increase, even turning red in some of the measures, being over 100 or over the 10% in terms of the percentage of positive tests. We do have some additional information for you tonight that we did not have in the past, kind of think from your recommendation. We do have a new dashboard that people can look at. It's the Peoria Unified COVID-19 dashboard. What will provide for the public is that they can look at that at any time to provide, and we will give them the number of current active cases by school or by site. And I'll show you what that means in just a second. There's also some additional information there. What's the definition of an outbreak, how we report it, those kinds of things. There's some additional information there, and it's updated every Friday. So it's a snapshot of what's happening on Friday, okay? And it happens and tells you what are the number of cases that are active. And by active, what we mean is that they are in the 10-day time period or 14-day isolation period that the students have to stay and be isolated from their schools in terms of it will start, if it starts today, it gets reported 10 days from now, that number will fall off because it's no longer an active case. okay? So it will update on that regular basis as it goes through. And so to find that, and I put this for the public also, this is our main page. We click the return to school. The return to school page will look like that. On the lower left, you see the Peoria Unified COVID-19 dashboard. And when we click there, you can get a look at the active cases by each school. And this is just a sample that gives every school down the process on that page. And so it's another piece of information we can give to our public that gives them the opportunity to see what's really happening in each of the places, each of the schools. So we'll stand for your questions, any comments that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Moss. Ms. Stone?
No, thank you for the update. I don't really have any questions. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Ms. Stone. Ms. Pingerelli? Okay. Ms. Ann Martinez?
I do have some questions. Thank you, Mr. Moss, for bringing this forward. And our parents have been asking for transparency, and having the team provide that line item is definitely useful. One of the presentations you presented to us, and I don't remember the quote, you talked about zip codes not focusing on the zip code because we have different students coming from different areas. So when you say tonight that some of our zip codes are red, help me understand how that is relevant now, which it wasn't then, or we're using that data to help drive decision-making. Just trying to understand why zip codes matter now, if they didn't before.
Mr. Sandoval, Ms. Ceja Martinez, here's, anytime, and we talked about this before many times, when you take a look at data, you always have to understand the positives of the data, what it's good at, and what it's not so good at. And so there are times when we look at that information, and I'll use the example of 85305 because population is one of the biggest variables that exists among our zip codes. And so if you have, for example, a population of 15 or 16,000, I have one that has 16,000 people in it. If you have 3 new cases, you report those cases out of 100,000 people. When you report those cases out of 100,000 people, you're essentially going to multiply that 3 cases times 8 to get to the 100,000 from the 16,000 in population. So that number will be very big, okay? So that's why we look at it, but it's simply one piece of information that we take into consideration. The second piece, and again, we talk about that one, where did the kids come to school? Where are the feeder schools? And for example, in the 85305 situation, we look at things like all of the feeder schools are in 85345, which is actually one of our lowest scores that are there. So it gives us information in terms of, hey, you need to take a look at this, but it also forces us to go look at other data that is existing to try to, and I'll use a big fancy educational word, triangulate the data that you have, because one piece of data doesn't necessarily give you the whole picture. You have to look at all the pieces that confirm whether or not that piece of data is correct or not.
Thank you for elaborating on that. Here's where I'm raising questions. You mentioned that some of the data is not good. And then I listened to our presentation, and let me just give you some background information why we would consider that data good or not good. What I heard in the mask conversation is that we're relying on self-reporting. And when I sat with the parent group, we have students who are scared to go to the nurse because they don't want to be sent home. So I question, and I don't know an answer to how to solve this problem. How reliable is the data if our students are not self-reporting, or our parents are not self-reporting? In addition to that, I've spoken to staff members who are not feeling well, who have not gotten tested. So I question the reliability of some of these numbers and how we're making the decisions. What I do see is an uptick. And what I do hear from our community is that we're reactive. What can our community expect if these numbers continue to go up?
So my first comment would be that when you say that we are relying on self-reporting, the we is society, right? So everyone is relying on self-reporting, not just the school district. If somebody is not feeling well and chooses not to go get a test, then that person is not reflected in our data as a community. The second piece then is exactly what Mr. Moss talked about, in that when we look at these areas and we see significant increase or it goes to red, we immediately start to, I mean, we're always checking on it, but we start to get hyper-focused in these hotspots, and we compare it to our dashboard, right? What are we seeing inside the school that might help paint a better picture? Today I had a conversation, or this week I should say, I've had conversations with individual members of the medical advisory team, asking, even, challenging them to dive into what in their expertise and maybe provide us even more information, just kind of a global look. I heard a couple of comments about the under 20 from our community. Where within that zip code, do we have access to that data that says, here's how many people under the age of 20 are being impacted or are reflected rather in those numbers. So there's a lot that goes into that, and as it continues, or as we continue to monitor that data, we would be communicating with the school community when we are concerned, and ask them to be hypervigilant as well.
What you mentioned, you'll be communicating when you are concerned. What are some of those factors that you are concerned? When you spoke last time, an outbreak is two situations are unrelated on the same campus. Is that a concern?
Well, what I would say is that all the cases are a concern. We rely heavily on the county to work with us, and when they see these hotspots or see cases within a school, they consult with us, and they would then start to direct us. Your numbers are getting significantly higher within the school. We don't have any situations right now where the county is saying you need to be looking at potentially closing a school.
I appreciate that statement. Since we do work with the county, and what I'm hearing clear is, though we have some of these numbers and some zip codes that are red, the county has deemed not a concern just yet. And when we get, and let me just do an overarching statement. To your point, every situation is a concern in life and well-being. But when you think about making decisions to mitigate risk and reduce numbers, it's definitely a community effort. And what I hear you say is the county has not deemed any particular area of the Peoria Unified School District as a potential next step to take action. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I think, yes, that is accurate.
Okay.
There are levels within that as well. That's why we say we get really hyper-focused on it, and why it's important that we get a whole picture of what we're dealing with. Mr. Moss mentioned Kellis High School in that area. That is a very, I would call it a volatile area. It comes up, it comes down, it comes up, it comes down. And so there are also, I think everyone's mind goes to closing schools. But there are also factors that we need to consider when it comes to extracurricular activities and what events we're hosting, when it comes to sports or those kinds of things. And so that's why when we're constantly focused on that, because when we look at it and say, okay, here is, as Mr. Moss referred to, a hot spot, we need to really start monitoring that to see, is what we're currently doing still appropriate? And currently, it is. But that is that's a daily and weekly conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ann Martinez. Mr. Moss, quick question for you. So you talked about a couple zip codes that we're seeing an increase in cases, right? Or going from, a deeper yellow, closer to red, I guess. Can you talk a little bit about, and do you have any data that reflects the correlation between that zip code, showing an increase, and the schools that are in that zip code, if they're showing more cases? And I guess where I'm headed is, well, actually, if we can talk about that real quick.
I know that we have not started down that process of doing some of those things. It was probably because we've had the changes this morning, it was one of the conversations I was going to have with our COVID response team to say, should we start tracking, for example, when a number goes up that we have, can we track that back to how many cases we have at each of our schools? And I think that's something we do need to keep track of. It's something that we can say, hey, we think this is coming, or we can see, yes, we had more increase here, so that's going to show up in our numbers, those kinds of things, because we do keep track of the daily, how many cases occur and those kind of things on a regular basis. They have records on all those.
Yeah, because I think conversely, it could also show, although a particular zip code is showing an increase in cases, if those schools within that, I'm going to call it a zone, aren't, right? Our mask protocol, all of our governance and protocol around safety is working.
Well, and I think, yeah, you're exactly right. And I think that's what Mr. Moss was referring to when we talk about our dashboard, right? And using our dashboard to look at active cases within a school. And if we're seeing an increase in the community, in the zip code data, but in our dashboard, it remains flat, or, it could be, in some cases, it could be 0 active cases within a school, even though the community data is increasing. And that's why it's important that we use all of it to shape and frame our thinking rather than just one data point.
Yeah, agreed. Any other questions, comments?
Related to this topic, but not to the data. So we do see an increase in numbers in certain areas, and I'm getting reports that students are turning in their laptops. Mr. Gay, do you want to share why we're having kids, some school sites are saying they're starting to collect laptops if they may be going back to virtual, or the situation's fluid?
Yes, Ms. Sayar Martinez.
Mr. Gay, if I could just
Oh, sorry.
be careful, we're going to answer that, but we do want to make sure we stay on our benchmark data. It might be appropriate for us to get that information to you in the Friday report.
Okay.
I mean, we can get detailed in the Friday report, but Mr. Gay, do you want to?
You just have to tell me why. I don't need the detail, the numbers.
Got
just why is that decision being made?
Well, I can say briefly that the schools were given the option to start collecting laptops from students who have come back to school and are getting in-person instruction. And the purpose there, pardon me, of course, is to get those laptops sanitized, get them back into carts and ready to be used in the classroom. They are also, at the same time, doing that so that they can be ready to reissue if students if the school closes, or is there some reason to reissue laptops to students.
Perfect, that's all I needed to know. And then the other question, and I'm just going to reiterate, we heard this comment at our parent meeting that our students, some of them appeared to be afraid to share some of other symptoms. How are we communicating with our students that their health is always a priority, and that the nurse is there to help them through anything of their medical needs?
Yeah, I made a note of that from our parent meeting, because that is such a delicate balance. We want our students to feel comfortable coming to their nurse and sharing information with their teacher and their parents. And I mean, that's an important aspect of keeping our schools open. And then you hear from students, you hear from some of the parents on the feedback that they're hearing from their students. I hear it from my own children. What if I'm not feeling well? And it's a really hard conversation to have because we need them to be honest and open with us, even though it could mean needing to take a break from in-person learning for a while. So it is a significant challenge. So I made a note of that and working with the team to potentially look at some kind of like an information campaign, build that confidence within our students and our families because it's important.
That's good to hear. Thank you. And I know our Dr. Walters and Ms. Leonard are working on the social and emotional. That campaign would definitely be helpful because we don't want them to live in fear if their medical needs, if their safe space is school. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Aaron Martinez. Mr. Moss, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, moving along to our informational reports. 10.1, Budget Facilities Planning and Construction Report. These are on our website. In addition to our district budget report for the month of July 20th, and all of our district enrollment reports for the month of September 2020, all on our website. Ms. Aries, upcoming meetings and events, anything to call out?
President Sandoval, the only note is that Election Day is 12 days away, so just a reminder to everyone to vote.
Thank you for that. Legislative, state, and local updates. Ms. Myers.
Well, thank you. President Sandoval, members of the governing board, to piggyback off of Mrs. Aries' reminder, if our community needs information on mail-in ballot deadlines and postmarks and things like that, they can go to our Maricopa County Elections website, and that's recorder.maricopa.gov elections for more information. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Reynolds, anything to add in that category? Nope. Thank you, sir. Going on to 11, other business, board member opportunity to readdress agenda items. Ms. Stone?
Nothing, thank you.
Ms. Spingarelli? Ms. A. Martinez?
I do have one because I forgot. So board recognitions. The calendar committee met, and I serve as a representative of the board. And Ms. Aries led that charge with her PR team, and we got the survey. We received the survey results, and I'm proud to say that we continue to increase that engagement. The previous year was about 5,000, and this year we are up about 6,300. So we're continuing to receive that valuable feedback, and the committee's hard at work of bringing some recommendations in the near future to the board. There.
Thank you for that. 11.2, request for agenda items for future governing board meetings. Ms. Stone?
No, I don't think so.
Ms. Spingarelli?
I would like to look at policy for mask mandates.
Just in general, like overall, or?
Our own. You said it's a regulation now.
Okay.
Have a formal policy?
Okay. Ms. Aaron Martinez?
You have a puzzled look, Doctor.
Yeah, well, I just want to make sure we're clear, so we've got some direction. So you would like us to bring a board policy for is it for a discussion, or you want us to bring it for a first read?
For just a discussion.
Okay.
Just to be clear, are you wanting to create a brand new policy or to address the policy JICA is what I noted Mr. Gay presented on? Is that correct? Mr. Gay, you have to correct me.
Yes, Ms. Ciara Martinez, the JICA policy is student dress. Now, of course, there's no reason that the policy would have to be confined to that. So you have options.
So, Ms. Pigarelli, are you looking to address that student dress code policy?
It would be to have A policy on.
A separate mess, okay. So from my understanding, always up for the discussion, a separate discussion of creating a brand-new policy on masks. That's what I understood it to be,
Brand new policy.
a brand-new policy.
Ms. Peoria, is that?
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Could I ask for, before we move on, just some clarification? It is, as we bring JICA, you don't necessarily need to create a new policy. We could adapt JICA student dress and add an aspect of masks to that policy. I'm just, does that,
That's fine,
I
yeah.
think I,
So the board takes ownership, is all.
we can bring that back.
That's fine.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All right. Ms. Contra, you good on that? Okay, perfect. Thank you, Ms. Pingrell. Anything else?
No.
Okay. Ms. San Martinez?
Just one request for a board report. I know we were discussing Valley Schools, reviewing insurance, health. Does that ring a bell, Ms. Myers?
President Sandoval, Mrs. Ceja Martinez, we have brought forward in the month of November the annual Valley Schools update. Is that what you're referring to?
That's correct. So and I am looking for an update on, and I could be totally wrong, and you can just tell me to go back to the November report. What I'm looking at is, I remember at one board meeting, we were talking about looking at other options or looking at how to improve, and you were doing an analysis. Does that sound familiar? Okay.
President Sandoval, Mrs. Ceja Martinez, over the course of our compensation study, the first study that we published a year and a half ago, and then what we're referring to is, I'm being reminded of a point of order that I cannot, because it's not agendized, go into great detail. So if you would like to make a request for an update in November, you're certainly welcome to do that. Thank you.
So that, I just trying to get the right words. Like, I don't recall what I need to ask for, but I was just like a board report on where we're at in that process, and I don't know the title of that.
We
Just
got
as
it.
yeah.
We got it.
Okay, perfect. That's all I need.
You good? Okay.
And if somebody will second that, that'd be great.
Oh, sorry. I'll second that. Okay, I have a couple items, just Friday reports, I believe. One of them, Ms. Myers, and you've probably already given this to us, but can you please provide the board with the current scope of work of our current maintenance company that we use? Perfect. Yeah, Friday report's great on that. And the last item, this could be a Friday report as well, just understanding how the district is really including the sites in conversations around as we make decisions globally, right? So I know we have each site that each principal, site leadership meets with their teachers and staff, right, to talk about, certainly site-specific items, but as we make global decisions as a district, I know we're having these meetings that, from what I understand, with our teachers and staff. If I can just get or we can get a board report on, how we're doing that, how that's going, and it really just kind of what that looks like.
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Okay, perfect. No, you're good. Thank you. You could. Be safe.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ms. Sarah Martinez. Okay, moving on to 12.1. I do need a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn the meeting at 8:14.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Ms. Sam Martinez and a second by Ms. Doan. Board members, please cast your votes. Motion passes 3, 1 absent, 1 not present. Thank you, board members. Thank you, cabinets. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.